Hello, in this video I'm going to show you how you can manage language translations on a multi-language Umbraco install using the Translation Manager package. So here I've got an Umbraco set up for one site in 3 different languages, and each of the languages has its own home node and all the subsequent nodes, and these have been set up to respond to the language codes and the domain. So for example, against the Welsh one, it's set to the Welsh language, and we've got a local host name here which is Welsh, so that when we go to the site we have the standard www version, and we can see we have a Welsh version and a Danish version of the same site. So our aim with translations will be to keep this master home site with all its content in sync with the other 2 sites, in sync with it, through translating the content from here into these other pages. So we've got the Translation Manager package installed, and the first thing we're going to need to do is create a translation set. A translation set tells the Translation Manager how your sites are set up, which one you consider to be your master site and which ones are your targets. So in this example we have the US English site as our master, and we translate into the other 2 languages for the other 2 sites, so that's Welsh and Danish. And then there are a few more settings on the translation set that can help you manage how the translations work. So copy on create means that when a node is created in the home master site, if it doesn't exist in the other 2 sites, it will be created. So it helps maintain the one-to-one relationship between your sites, which you may or may not want. And then you've got translate node name. What that will do is translate the actual node name of any piece of content, which is useful if you want the URLs to be translated as well, because often they're built off the node names, so translating them will cause the URL to also be translated. And then there's the properties. Now by default, Translation Manager will translate all text-based content from your site, so it won't try and translate numbers or pickers or anything like that, but any text will be extracted and sent to translation. Now if, like on this site where we're using the starter kit, there are things you don't want translating, you can use this to either explicitly pick the things you want to translate or exclude them. So here we're going to say star, which means include everything except the product SKU and the Twitter username, so they won't come across as part of any translation. And for this example we're going to use a default provider. We're going to use the translator dashboard, which comes as part of the Translation Manager package, which allows translators to translate things internally within Umbraco. There is out of the box a file provider as well, and there are other providers that can be written or provided to send the translations to other places. And auto send, what that does is it allows you to streamline the translation process a bit and allow your editors to directly send the translations. If that's unticked, then all your editors can do is request pending translations. They can't actually send them off to the translators, so it depends on how your workflow works. But when we save that, we've now got a translation set and we've got our targets and master site set up. So if we go to the main site again, we can right click on any of the nodes in the home and the main site, and we can do send to translate, and you can see we've got the languages and we can pick which languages we want to translate. And because we clicked on the allow auto create there, the editor gets an option to submit the translation job immediately. So we'll do that just to follow the flow through. So what's happening now is we're going to request a full site translation of that home site across. So now we've got the option to create the translation job, so it's going to be a translation with the language will be replaced and on the time. So that's what we're going to do. Just put that back, and there it's the home page and all other items, and we're using the translator dashboard because we pick that too. So now what happens is Translation Manager is extracting the content, the text-based content from each of the pages and creating the translation nodes, which it will then wrap up into 2 translation jobs, one for each language. So it's created the nodes, and now it's just going to wrap the nodes up and it's created the jobs. So now with that done, we should be able to go to the Translation Manager, and we can see that things have gone straight into submitted because we skipped pending there by creating the job straight away. And so here's our first one, and you can see these are all the nodes that have been created. There's the 24 pages have all got translation nodes, and they've been sent off to translation dashboard. So from a Translation Manager point of view, they've been submitted to your translation provider and you are waiting for them to return. When they do return, they will appear in received. and obviously you will then deal with them and they go into archived. So because we actually sent those jobs off to the translator dashboard, they've remained within Umbraco, so they're using the inbuilt translation provider tools that we've got. So what we've got here, we've set up is another user. This might be your translator, and you can see we've only given them access to the translator dashboard section, and indeed only one of the languages, so they can only see the Welsh translations at the moment. They can't see any other part of the site. So from a translator point of view, what they can do is go into each of the into the translation job, and they can see each individual node and how many properties it's got, and equally they can then go into each of these individual jobs and they can start to do the translations for you. So for example, here is the node name, so this is the starter kit page, and we can just simply translate that one field, and then there's other fields over here. We can translate this, and if there's any rich text, then they get a very basic rich text editor, so they can also translate that should they want to, and add formatting. So in that sense, that they can do that, and they would obviously then work through the entire thing and translate all the nodes that need to be translated. And if this had gone off to an external translation provider, they would translate everything and then send you the file back, and you'd upload the file and continue the process. Because we're using the inbuilt translator, we can actually return the updated translations, and what happens there is that we put a partial translation return in, so we don't have to necessarily wait for the full translation to come back. So what we now see from an admin point of view within Umbraco is that this translation has been partially returned to us, and you can just see that there's actually not much at all because we only did one node. You can see there's one node and we're reviewing it, so we can go in and we can look at that one item and we can see that it's been translated and what's been translated and where, and at this point we can choose to remove or edit any of the pending translations. But in reality, what we probably would want to do is just get that translation onto our site. So you can see we've got that one is the only one we can actually select. So we could select all, but we can only select that one because it's the only one that's been returned. And at this point we can approve and publish, and that will immediately just approve that and publish it to the site, or we can approve and save, which will push it back into Umbraco but won't publish it. So for this instance, we're going to approve and publish that. And so now that one node has been approved. The rest of the job is still in progress, but that one has been approved. So if we go back to our content and into our Welsh site and into the page we've just updated, you can see already that the node name has changed and the content has been brought across. And you can do that for the whole set, can be brought across, and obviously as the translation happens, all the items can be translated and brought across into Translation Manager. And that's how you would basically translate your whole site in one hit. Now, if you actually don't want to translate your whole site and you only wanted to do sections, obviously you can go in and just pick the section that you want to translate, and again send to translate, and just pick that element and it will group it together into a job and it will be sent. But equally, another setting that the Translation Manager has in its default settings is to track changes as and when they happen. So if we were to look now at the pending translations, you can see there are no pending translations because there's stuff in a job. But if we were to go back to the site and a standard content editor was to come in here and say, update this page, title, just the title, and they were to save and publish that, then that in the background has been captured by Translation Manager as a pending translation. So we can now see in both languages we have one pending content item waiting translation, and you can see it's about that, and it's just the page title because that's the only element that's changed. So that will just sit there pending, and you can either send that off immediately to translation, or you can wait, because if the editor was to go in again to that and do something else, like add a description, then that's another field that's been updated, and instead of creating a second pending translation node, what it does is updates the one that's sitting in pending. So you can now see that the two elements are waiting there to be translated, and so at that point you can choose to send that off. Now at the moment this is warning you because there is in fact a translation job that we haven't fully realized. So you can now see that this node has open translations, which means if you push this through, there's a translation job in the way. And in fact you can probably go in to the Danish one as be an example, and you'll see that node will appear highlighted, because for that very reason it's there it is, it's pending, because of actually there is other things happening with the translation. So that's an option you might want to choose if you want to sort of do continuous translation with Translation Manager. But if you just want to do one-off translations, then you can actually just turn that off in the settings. You can go in and you can choose to not do translate on save and change other elements of the settings. Within Translation Manager, there's also notifications, so it will send emails at each of those points if you tell it to, as to things have gone into pending, things have been submitted, things have been received, and things have been approved. And that's the basics of how you would use Translation Manager to keep your site up to date.